Hey guys, welcome back to Horsetooth Cinema. Today we're going to be pissing some people off on the channel. Yeah, it's been a while since I've strayed from the mainstream opinion quite this much. Today I'm going to be reviewing Obsession. This is the latest horror film to really kind of set the box office on fire, and it's directed by Curry Barker. Unrelated to Clive Barker, I did have to look that up, but I just wanted to make that note. This film is about a character named Bear who is trying to attract the attention of his crush, Nikki, and he decides to he goes to a oddity shop and purchases something called a one wish willow, which gives him one wish. He doesn't think too much of it, but he wishes for Nikki to love him more than anybody in the world, and he learns fairly quickly that he should be careful what he wishes for. So I didn't know much about Curry Barker going in. I had just kind of seen the trailer. Honestly, I was pretty excited to see this. I thought it was a really cool premise. It's just a fun way to market the movie. And I started getting really excited once I heard all of the reviews, all of the hype around the movie and everything. And I have just got to say, like, what movie were other people watching? I hated this film. I think it's a great premise. I think the idea of taking this, sort of monkey paw, superstitious device as, a way to kind of satirize relationships and kind of, basically take this character of Bear, take his dream of getting this girl to love him and, make him realize the nightmare of what that looks like, without her actually just coming to it on her own. So I think it's a really cool idea. You could take it so many different directions. I think probably the most ideal version of this movie for me is playing it in kind of a pop art sort of a way where I think when I was watching it, it reminded me a little bit of John Carpenter's Christine, where in that movie, the character Arnie, he latches on to this car that is now a big part of his life, which is, possessed by possibly like a female spirit of some sorts. And it makes him feel really powerful. It gives him this confidence that he didn't have, and he slowly starts to realize how much this is corrupting him. I think that's a great idea, and again, it's the tone of it is, it kind of feels like you could be watching something like Grease, or maybe even something a little bit more modern, like an '80s high school movie, like a John Hughes movie. It just happens to have a horror angle. I think another interesting direction to take it would be kind of the Euro horror, more serious direction, something like Zulawski's Possession, for example. I think in that way, you can't really play up the camp as much as you could in something like Christine. It has to be a little bit more like the performances in particular, I think have to be taken a lot more seriously. You really need someone like Isabelle Adjani to carry it, and kind of play up the psychodrama elements, really dig into the ideas. And if I had to categorize Obsession, like the direction it decides to take this premise, I would say it takes it in the most generic, like just Blumhouse, first time filmmaker horror 101 direction you could possibly take it. I think every decision in this movie, from every single one of Nikki's outbursts, where she's sitting in a group of, of friends, and she starts laughing maniacally, or just doing something extremely, extremely weird that's obviously played for horror, to the actual suspense sequencing of a lot of the main horror bits. I'm thinking of. I won't spoil it too much, but there's a bit later in the movie where two characters are sitting in a car, and there's a bit of tension where the Nikki character, basically the fear of the scene is that she could just come bursting into the scene at any moment and just start wreaking havoc on the car. The shot is framed so obviously where that's what the shot is implying, that when it finally happens, it just feels like nothing built up to anything. The way the film uses music to build up to scares, the way it just sort of paces them, it's so just like the most tired Blumhouse filmmaking. It's again, it reeks of first time filmmaker. And over the years, I have seen my fair share of really mid to crappy Blumhouse films that oftentimes have a really good premise and then are just not directed very well. That's not normally enough to get me to hate a film. Oftentimes I really try to see the value in what was there. even if the execution is a little lackluster. But this film, I think, takes it a step further to piss me off because it has this pretension about it, where it's trying to, really get to the core of relationship dynamics, and it's trying to say something, but it doesn't really end up doing so very successfully. Again, with the setup, I really like the idea of you have this character Bear who I don't think I would classify him as kind of as an incel. There's like moments early on in the film where there's some really dark bits with him that you kind of think that's the direction they're going to take it in, but it doesn't really go in that direction. He's not like an overt misogynist in a way that a lot of incels are. I would call him more of a soft boy in that he's like well-meaning, but he just doesn't have that much of an understanding of what the other person might want out of the relationship, and like he does seem just very fast to try to get what he wants, but more in like just like a cringy way rather than anything like super sinister. And the idea of taking that dynamic in the relationship and basically taking his fantasy to the extreme and let it play out, where yeah, he gets his wish and then he gets to see what a nightmarish vision it is both for him and for her, where she doesn't have any control over the situation and she's basically like being possessed by somebody. Really cool idea. But I think if you're going to make that premise work, you have to make the characters more than just like cookie cutter archetypes. And for me, the film never was able to escape those bounds. I think if you've seen the trailer of this, and you kind of know the basics of what I've just told you, you could probably predict every single decision these characters end up making correctly. There's almost never do they make a decision that surprises you. And the movie just kind of stays on this one note of, they're together and she starts doing something crazy and it starts freaking him out. And then it's sort of, she makes up for it and goes back to normal. It does that for so long. Thinking about the film's influences, I mentioned earlier, like Possession and Christine, I really started to think about what a good version of this might have looked like for me. I think it would have been really interesting, for example, if, early on, Bear starts to really like this fantasy and think that the wish has worked and it's going to be everything he thought it would be. And there are a couple of moments where, like they're having sex, I think, and like, there's a little montage that runs of them making each other breakfast and doing all these cute couple things. But the problem is, as soon as he breaks the One Wish Willow, we immediately cut to a shot of basically her silhouette outside of her house, right from the car. He's sitting in the car, he just dropped her off, she's standing there. It's immediately played as horror. It's right away, the direction this is going to go. And so nothing it does to try to make it seem like this worked or that this might work out for the character it is successful at all. It's meaningless. And like, again, I'm thinking about movies like Christine. Like, I love how in that movie, Arnie, even though he's clearly being corrupted by Christine the car, like he starts to adopt this like bad boy persona that he didn't have in the film. And so I thought it would have been really interesting if we see a similar like confidence out of Bear that we never saw before, but he just kind of remains the same character throughout. He's just as apprehensive about, talking to his friends about the situation as he was about trying to ask Nikki out in the first place earlier in the movie. And similarly for Nikki, I think it would have been much more interesting if, because early on, the movie has this interesting dynamic where I would say, like, it's a little ambiguous as to whether or not she just likes him anyway, because they're like, he's about to drop her off at the house and she, I think, even straight up says like, hey, if you like me, you should say that now. And I think they set that up pretty well. The problem is, I think with the whole wish, like the horror, the possession aspect of it, they could have kept that going a little bit, where you start to ask yourself as a viewer, did this even work? Is this just kind of, did this wish even do anything? Does she just like him anyway? And then it starts to be more clear, like, that there's something bad going on here. And then it would become even darker because, the idea is, if she just liked him anyway, and he didn't need to do this, then he's just basically like, have her surrendered her autonomy completely. But again, because it's just played as the most generic horror imaginable from the exact moment he breaks that piece of wood, the film it just stagnates. It's just mind-numbingly boring for me in how it progresses. And again, even all that said, that's also not normally enough to get me to completely hate a film. That's enough to get me to dislike a film. The thing that made me hate it is the ending. I don't want to spoil it for anybody that hasn't seen the movie, but there is a very dark subject matter that they sort of write into the plot as a device, and I think doing so is pretty tasteless. And if you're gonna pull it off, again, you need to have better ideas. You need to have a better grasp on the subjects you're trying to make a comment on. All that. Doing it without those ideas just felt like shock porn. Like honestly, like the last shot of the movie, I don't want to totally spoil it, but the way that the camera spins out from this horrific scene that you're watching of the aftermath of how that subject is written into the plot. And then it just, like we pan over to the TV where it says written and directed by Curry Barker. It felt really egotistical. It felt like, hey, I'm dunking after, tackling all these ideas, when really what I've done is just wallow in misery porn, I have to say. It reminded me a little bit of how I felt about the film Bring Her Back last year, which similarly got a lot of buzz, in the horror community. And I just found it really nihilistic and tasteless, and I just felt numb by the end of watching it. I felt like it didn't care about its characters in any meaningful way, and I just, I was not attached to it emotionally. But all that being said, I think that film is pretty well made. I think the Philippou brothers have a much better understanding of like kinetic filmmaking and like how to really make a scene interesting and innovative. I don't think Curry Barker does. I think again, this did not like anything that was interesting about this movie is the premise, the way it's directed. Again, it's just the most basic Blumhouse horror sequencing you can imagine, of just like really cheap, nonsensical jump scares. I find almost nothing redeeming about this movie. I know I'm super in the minority here. A lot of people seem to be really taken to this. Totally get it. I've also read some reviews I would call even more negative than myself. There's some people have brought up the criticism that the film is really insensitive to like bipolar disorder, with the way that Nikki kind of switches back and forth between these personalities. Personally, when I watch a film and I'm reviewing it and kind of trying to critique it in some way, I really have to stick with what I felt when I was in the theater. I didn't think about that analogy. It's a criticism I could see people having, but it did not occur to me. But as I've said, a bunch of other stuff did. This is a 1-star movie. I absolutely hated this, I've got to say. Anyway, I know it's a bit of a hot take, but that is my review of this film. If you liked this, please make sure to like the video down below and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Got more videos coming out soon, and I will see you guys in the next one. See ya.